afternoon and welcome to Fort Bend Voter News. My name is Cameron Hill and I'm with and part of the Fort Bend Election News editorial board. Thank you so much for being here. Please introduce yourself and tell people why you're running.
Good afternoon. I'm Judge Mike Engelhart of the 151st Civil District Court in Harris County. I've been a judge for over 13 years, and I was reelected most recently to my fourth term in 2020 for a 4-year term. But here in the midterm, I'm running for the First Court of Appeals in Houston, which covers a 10-county area, including a bunch of counties around here: Fort Bend, Brazoria, Galveston, Harris, and several other counties. I'm running for this position because I have the most experience, and I think I can bring a level playing field, fairness, integrity, and a tremendous amount of trial and litigation experience to this position on the Court of Appeals. I truly believe I'm the most qualified candidate for this position.
That sounds great. First question is, once elected, re-elected, what will be some of your top priorities?
Well, I think there's a couple. If I'm elected to this position, so I'll have been a trial court judge for 14 years at that point, and so this is a different position. This is the Court of Appeals. This is the court that reviews what the trial courts like mine have done, kind of grades their papers, if you will, and says whether they got it right or got it wrong. And so the things that I want to do on the Court of Appeals is I want to bring fairness and I want to bring efficiency. As a trial court judge for the last 14 years, I have had one of the lowest case inventories of any of the 24 civil district courts in Harris County, usually the lowest. That means that I work hard, I get my work done, I make rulings, and I don't make lawyers and litigants wait for justice. I am proactive and I get things done. I think that the Court of Appeals works too slowly. I think we should issue opinions more quickly and make rulings more quickly so people can have some finality. And what do I mean by that? When you go to the Court of Appeals, people think, well, what about the Texas Supreme Court? There's a higher level of appeal. Couldn't I just appeal there? And yes, potentially you could, but the Texas Supreme Court only takes a tiny, tiny fraction of cases from the Court of Appeals. So for 95% plus of cases that end up in the Court of Appeals, like the one that I'm running for, that's the end of the road. So people need to have finality. People need to know that they have consistent and fair and experienced justice, and I think I can bring that in an efficient manner and help make people's lives better, like I've been trying to do for the last 13 years.
That sounds great. Mrs. Denise Joshua.
Hi, Judge Engelhart. You mentioned that you will be covering a 10-county area.
That's right.
And you mentioned one of the challenges is that the wheels move kind of slowly. What else do you see as a challenge handling 10 counties?
Well, you have all sorts of different kinds of cases. I grew up in New Jersey, but I've been in Texas for 30 years. This town has been great to me. This area has been, I met my wife, I had my babies, my boys are now grown, they're native Texans, which blows my mind. And Houston in this area is the kind of place where if you work hard, it doesn't matter where you're from, what your background is, who your family is, I think you could be successful. But we have such a diverse background. And I had to learn as a Houston, Texas judge, for example, all about oil and gas law. That's not something that I did, but you can imagine in Houston, Texas, you got to learn something about oil and gas. Well, there's a zillion different kinds of things that make up our area, from rural and agricultural to oil and gas and minerals to real estate to criminal and family. And so I think the experience that I have as a trial court judge, being really, really conversant, really, really understanding of the rules of evidence and the rules of procedure and the rules of appellate procedure, because I did a lot of appeals as a private lawyer before I became a judge, will help make those, will flatten the learning curve and help me understand new issues more quickly. And again, getting back to what I said before, help issue opinions more quickly and more consistently and fairly.
That's good. This is Alexandria Jack.
Yes, Judge, what are the biggest changes you think that we need to see in our justice system today?
I'm so glad you asked that because that's something that I've thought a lot about in my 13 years as a trial court judge and as a board certified attorney. One is I see a lot of people who come into court who don't have lawyers. And remember, I'm a civil district court judge, so people are not going to prison in my court, but they could be going through a life-changing ordeal where they might be losing their house or their life savings, or potentially standing to gain compensation for something terrible that has happened to them or that they've lost. It's a very difficult process. And it is not, as I like to say all the time to those folks when they come in and they think they could just start arguing, it's not Judge Judy.
Right.
It's not the People's Court. The 151st District Court, where I'm lucky enough to serve, is a state district court. It's the big time. In the mid-1980s, you may have heard of a case called Texaco versus Pennzoil. That was a $13 billion verdict, at the time the largest jury verdict in the history of the United States. Guess what court that was in? That was in my court. Now, I was 15 at the time. I was not involved. But it is a huge undertaking to file a lawsuit and pursue it in a state district court. And you have to know what you're doing. And if you don't have a lawyer, guess what? You're in trouble. You're likely to get run over by the other side that has an attorney. So what do I want to do? I want to create the equivalent of the public defender's office, but for civil courts. There should be a place you can go for free or almost no money, where you can sit down with an attorney dependably and have them represent you, either for free or very low cost, and help walk you through just the fundamentals of defending yourself in a lawsuit so that you don't get run over. And I think we ought to fund that as taxpayers, because all of us from time to time find ourselves staring down the barrel of a lawsuit and we don't know what to do. And we shouldn't have to lose our life savings if we're in the right and if we can defend ourselves and if we have valid defenses. That's one. Number two, you've all heard of frivolous lawsuits, right? But frivolous lawsuits is a loaded term that I think people use to, insurance companies and big businesses sometimes use to scare away people who have legitimate claims. If you've been run over by a truck and your legs are broken, or God forbid your spinal cord is severed or something like that, and you're suing for millions of dollars, that's not a frivolous lawsuit. That's a serious and real lawsuit that you have every right to pursue. What a frivolous lawsuit in my mind is when someone who's got a lot of money and power uses the court system inappropriately to gum up the works and stop somebody else from getting justice. And so I want to root those out. I want to increase the penalties for that kind of abuse of the system and make sure that everyday folks, regular Texans, can either be defended or have their day in court without having to, without being overrun by someone just because they have a lot of money.
Sounds great. In closing, let's talk to the voters and say, why vote for you?
Well, I'm the only board certified lawyer in this race in either party. I am unopposed in the Democratic primary, and so I'm going to be the nominee in November. I'm very grateful for that, but I think it's because the voters and the other folks who decide who's going to run in what races and believe that I'm doing a good job and don't think that I should have an opponent in the Democratic primary. I didn't have a Democratic or Republican opponent in 2020 when I ran, and I will tell you that running a race without an opponent makes the outcome much more predictable. But I think that my experience of 13 years as a trial court judge, knowing how the sausage is made and seeing how lawsuits work from before they're filed all the way through the lawsuit, through the jury trial, through the end, and through the judgment and enforcement of the judgment, makes me the most qualified. I think I'm the only candidate in this race who has tried an actual jury trial. I've tried dozens as a lawyer and hundreds as a judge. I've drafted hundreds of jury charges for the instructions and the questions for the jury at the end of the trial. And so I really do understand both the trial process and the appellate process. And so I do think that I have the best plan to make our courts fairer and faster, and that I have the expertise and the experience. So if you're interested in learning more about my campaign and my candidacy, or if you want to volunteer or donate, you can go to our website, which is www.judgeengelhart.com. That's www.judgeengelhart, just like on the shirt. I don't know if you can see it. Engelhart.com. That's ENGELHART. But guess what? I bought both URLs, so if you spell it wrong, you'll get there anyway. This is Judge ENGELHART.com. I'd be grateful for your support and to allow me to continue to serve the people of Houston and the surrounding area on the Court of Appeals, and as I always say, continue making people's lives better.